and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, retired librarian turned homeschool mom, and in this video we're going to look at a film that is science-y and otherwise just kind of completely pointless. It's just funny. This is an 80s movie. This is Real Geniuses starring Val Kilmer. This came out in 1985. The science is odd and probably highly inaccurate, but it's funny. And there's still mild sexism because, again, it came out in 1985. So the basis of this story is you have it takes place mostly at a college, which is one of those various schools that are modeled after the California Institute of Technology, also known as Caltech. In fact, I think there's Easter eggs in here referring to Caltech. And essentially what happens is you have this professor who's being secretly talked to by the military, the CIA, to create a laser that can kill a single target from space. So he's using students, very brilliant students, to do this, including this character. Val Kilmer plays a character by the name of Chris Knight. He's about to graduate. He, I think, came to the school relatively young. He was, what on earth, Jerry is his first name, is the professor's name. I'm going to go back to the character list here. What is his name here? Professor Jerry Hathaway. So, he's the professor. Chris Knight was his star student, but Chris is goofing off like crazy. So he brings in a young boy who's about 16 years old, complete genius, by the name of Mitch. Mitch is very nerdy. He's stereotypical nerdy. His parents do not understand him. I think he describes them basically what Hathaway, this is his mindset here. It's like the majority of people compared to you have the intelligence of a carrot. So that kind of sets his brain off, and that's his thought. And he works with a variety of students. One of them, he has his brown-nosing student, Kent. Let's see, who is the actor who plays Kent? And it is not showing me, which is kind of funny because Kent is interesting. He's a typical brown-nosing student who kisses up to professors and does their dirty work, though he, of course, is also not particularly liked by them and treated pretty badly. So let's see. Who is Kent? Kent. Who's the actor who plays Kent? I can find him. Here we go. Robert Prescott is the name of the actor. Pull him up briefly. He does not look... Yeah, he looks very, very different now. Yeah, he's stuck up, and he's definitely the brown noser. He actually tries to sabotage them again, but Holloway brings Mitch in and puts him in charge of this laser project. And now Mitch has admired Chris Knight, and his first interactions with Chris Knight are very funny. He comes back to his room after being somewhere. He's traditionally kind of the brown noser, listening to all the professors who, this is college, not high school, and nobody's paying attention. So eventually he interacts with Chris, and Chris has pretty much made a mess. He's thrown all Mitch's clothes everywhere, and he's running around playing with some sort of robotic flying thing. And Mitch is very confused. This is the kid that he's admired, and he's a complete and utter goofball. And Chris has basically realized that he's probably watched too many people burn out, and eventually you kind of figure out what happens to him and why he's become this way and irritating Hathaway like crazy. So Mitch he wants to be a serious student. You see him, all his textbooks, going to classes, and slowly the class goes from a bunch of students and a professor to basically an audio tape with a bunch of tape recorders. So it's the students, pretty much the professor records himself, sets it up, and leaves. And the students come in at the start of the class, set up basically things to record his recording, and then leave. So that pretty much shows the seriousness of this. In the meantime, you have Hathaway and Chris going back and forth, and the military is saying, you need to essentially produce quickly. So at one point in time, you have the other thing that's oddly happening is Mitch keeps seeing someone go into their closet. A very large person who goes into her closet. So what happens is he's depressed, he's miserable, he's treated pretty badly because he's a nerd surrounded by nerds, but a lot of these nerds are kind of goofing off. And eventually Kent, because Kent is nasty and Kent doesn't like him because the Professor Hathaway is basically he's treating Mitch better, and he realizes that Mitch is probably smarter than him. And basically what Kent does is he records Mitch on the phone to his parents and then broadcasts it throughout the dorm. So Mitch is ready to leave. And Chris comes in and says, listen to me. I used to be like you. Carried a briefcase, dressed like this. Mom did all sorts of things, basically guaranteeing that no girl would ever come near me. Then one day, I woke up and I followed, what is his name? Laszlo Holyfeld. So the guy is like, who's this? The guy in the closet. And so he follows him down to the steam tunnels, which apparently are possibly true for Caltech. There's a lot of Caltech references in this film. And basically, because I think Mitch has done that and been kind of terrified with strange things going on down there. But Chris Knight says, I followed him and I saw a horrible sight. He's like, what? Laszlo in his pajamas. Again, this is a comedy. And so he's like, what? So I talked to him. And he apparently, Holyfeld was the big name on campus back in the 70s. And all he cared about was his work. He cared about problems and solving them until somebody told him that what he was creating was killing people. And so he cracked and went to these stamps. Basically, he's hiding in the steam tunnels, apparently he's filling out sweepstakes entries by like the thousands. And apparently I was looking at the IMDb page, this is based off something that like 3 or 4 Caltech students actually did to a McDonald's sweepstakes, and they won like 1/5 of the prizes by doing this. So basically Chris tells him, it's like, you have to be smart, but you have to have fun. No matter what, you're going to be intelligent. It's not going to go away, but be creative with what you're doing. And it's like, yes, goof off. And yes, at one point in time, this is the 80s. Take it for what it is. He coaxes his lab mates into a beach party with a bunch of student beauticians. It's a little sexist. There is another female character in here by the name of, what is her name? She's hitting on Mitch, and her name is Jordan. She's an engineering student, oddly enough. A very intelligent, slightly crazy, I think she might have ADD, engineering student. She's kind of, her and Mitch end up in a relationship. And then you have another woman by the name of Sherry who's trying to find the smartest person around, and she's kind of sleeping her way through things. Again, forgive the 80s. Just a little bit. Because this came back out in 1985. No, you don't actually see anything. It's very much implied. Yes, this would probably be seen by children to an extent because it's funny. So, however, what ends up happening is, again, the military is pressuring Hathaway. So he basically tells Chris that if you don't give me my laser, I'm going to fail you and I'm going to prevent you from graduating. So Chris gets depressed. Mitch kind of drags him out of it, and they start working really hard to get this laser. So right before their exams, Chris leaves to go to his final test. Kent decides to sabotage it. I think he smears the mirror. So when Chris comes back and turns it on, it eats itself. And he goes kind of nuts. And he's like, what the heck? And then, now, earlier on, and this is almost considered a goof, he uses dry ice that's being held cold by liquid nitrogen to use the vending machine without actually using money. And he sees this, basically he's slamming in the kind of kitchen area, and he looks at it and he has a epiphany. And he goes in and uses, and this is completely unscientific from what I've been able to tell, liquid bromine in a solid state that's basically turned into a gaseous state. So he talks to Mitch. They figure this out, and they create a massive, very powerful laser. And thus they have done it. So it's like, okay, he tells Jerry, it's like he shows Jerry, shows Kent, who's now pissed off because he hasn't bested these two other smart students. And it's like, look, I've created your laser. It's small, it's portable, and it's really, really hot. And then they leave and goof off. But then Laszlo shows up. They're at a burger place. He's like, I've been thinking about what you've been doing. And he's like, this is, it doesn't last very long. It's very small. It can only be used for a minimum amount of purposes. And Chris is like, it doesn't matter. Let the engineers figure out. He's like, what if somebody already had a purpose for it? Basically going back to what he learned back in the 70s. And they go back, and the laser's been taken, and so I think he created a spinning mirror. And Chris is ticked off. And Laszlo's like, yeah, I get it. You're pissed off, but what are you going to do about it? So, and again, they do the random hacking thing. If you're familiar with, no, this isn't realistic. You can't just randomly type things and hack into passwords. Do not try this. It will not work. But that's what they do. They sneak onto the they follow Hathaway. They figure out he's gone to the military base. They sneak onto the military base, sabotage, and mess with the coordinates. That's what Laszlo was doing from a distance. They help him sneak in to the coordinates of where they're going to be shooting this thing. And I think they mess with how powerful it is. So they do that, and they change the coordinates. Then they go to Hathaway's house, and Hathaway hates popcorn. And yes, this is important. They essentially create it so the laser shoots Hathaway's house and sets off a lot of popcorn that essentially destroys his new home. That's kind of the end of the film. But essentially there's popcorn. They also do something slightly weird to Kent. So they use gas to knock him out in his dorm room and install some sort of receiver into his braces and make him think God is speaking to him. And that's also how they figure out what's going on. And then they tell him to go to Hathaway's house right before they do it. They don't want to hurt him. They had previously pissed him off because they disassembled his car and reassembled it in his room. Yeah, Jordan helps with that. Yeah, they disassemble it. He basically, yeah, it's a tiny little car, and they reassemble it in his dorm room. Yeah, it's very funny. He's very, very pissed off. So, and I do there's masturbation jokes in here involving Jell-O with Kent. Just as a warning. Again, it's 80s. It's very 80s. It's very funny, but it's very 80s. This is not something you want to show to your younger kids because, again, a little bit of sexism. Again, there's that one masturbation joke going on here. So, and that's essentially the end of the film, is the house is destroyed by popcorn. Hathaway's pretty much discredited with the military. They want nothing to do with him. It's like, essentially, the one guy who protested what they were doing was killed. It's off screen. And then essentially it's the end. The house is destroyed. When they do this, they bring, I think, the head of the dean of the university and the mayor. They convince him to come, and they hide kind of in a ditch across from Hathaway's house, and they basically see what happens, and they explain everything that happens. And then Laszlo shows up with Sherry, who, again, she finally found the smartest person around, which was him, and he won, I think he said maybe 1/5 or 1/3 of all these prizes, and they're going to leave and go up. She's like, I have a cabin up in Wyoming. We're going to go live there. She's like, I've been looking for him forever. It's very funny. And then basically it kind of ends with happily ever after. And just kind of, and then of course Hathaway shows up and realizes his house is now filled with popcorn and completely, utterly destroyed. I don't know how realistic that is. It's not really the point. The science in here is probably very, very bad. But again, not the point. It's funny. That's really it. This is an enjoyable. Real Genius is a 1980s, absolutely utterly hilarious film. Probably middle school into high school. It's one of those films that, if you're just looking for a fun kind of science-y 80s film to put on with your kids, maybe again, it's one of those things where you guys they've had a long week, or you've had a long semester, or whatever time in your time to take a break, and you just kind of want to sit and goof off with your kids and want something slightly family friendly that's completely unrealistic and absolutely utterly hilarious in most cases, mildly sexist. Again, 80s, so it's very, very 80s. And Val Kilmer is funny. The actor who plays Mitch, you don't really see him that much, is Gabriel Jarrett. He does mostly, he does stage work mostly these days. Let's see. And I'm going to see, let's see, what is the actress who played Jordan in here? She's not, yeah, it doesn't look like she's done much of anything. No. Anything since. She's a Canadian actress. Yeah, looks like the last thing she did was in 88. So it looks like she's moved on from acting. And there's a few other, there's not really a lot of major names in this. But it's a fun 80s kind of nostalgia, science-y movie. There's a lot of, if you went to Caltech, you'll probably get more out of it because they have those little Easter eggs in them from one of these things that's like modeled after the California Institute of Technology and a lot of the nerdy stuff that they do. But otherwise, there's really no point to it. It's also one of those things where you're looking, it's the 80s, so they're not quite sure how lasers work, because lasers is a new science at this point. It's not really a new science anymore. And the science of that laser makes no sense from what I've been able to tell. But not the point. It's funny. It is also kind of a warning of, if you want any morals in this, be careful. Know what you're doing when you're particularly highly intelligent science people. Don't just pay attention to the work. You have to know what it means. If there's any message to this film, it's that. It's, as Laszlo said, it's like, you can't just pay attention to solving problems. You have to know practical applications of them. Otherwise, you can get in trouble. And you do have to have fun with if you're highly intelligent, have fun with it. It doesn't always have to be everything so serious. Enjoy it. Goof off a little. Don't just become obsessed with doing nothing but the work, because then you can essentially go crazy. They do show that if somebody's studying and just starts randomly screaming and running off, which may happen in some of these higher institutions of education, where the pressure is just so high that people go nuts. And that it does pressure that. It also shows people being kind of lazy. And again, a lot of 80s tech. Lots and lots of 80s tech in this film. You might have to explain to some of the kids, like, what is that? It's a tape recorder. And yes, it's 80s. So it's a fun film. It's not really all too complicated. Happy ending and all. But it's a good film if you're just looking to goof off. Put in something fun, sit with your teenagers, sit with your middle school students. I don't know if younger kids can probably watch it. I don't know how much they'd get out of it. Again, there's a few jokes that might go over their head, but it's funny. Again, 80s, a little bit of 80s sexism going on there. Not a lot of female characters in this except for Jordan and female student beauticians, and the implication that this is the only sex these young guys might ever get in their lives. It's 80s. This came out in 1985. But again, overall, the film is good and funny and enjoyable to watch for, I wouldn't say the entire family. It's not a wholesome movie. There are some slightly inappropriate jokes. Let me see, what is this? What is it considered? It's probably PG-13. Nope, it's PG. So there can't be much in there. But again, it probably rated in the 80s. So I think certain other younger films were considered PG back then. But again, it's fun. I'm reviewing this because it's something that I enjoy, that it makes me laugh. And it's something that I turn to when I'm looking for something that I can just watch and just enjoy without thinking too hard. And sometimes you need some of those films. And particularly if you're doing school and it's one of those days and you need a break. And everybody needs a break. And just kind of, let's sit down and watch something fun. That the science is wrong, but it has some good jokes, and it's very nostalgic for 80s. So, and very 80s tech. So, because again, 1985. Val Kilmer is very good. He's very, very funny as Chris Knight in this. So, and then Laszlo Holyfeld is played by another actor. But again, it's funny. And it has a good message of goofing, of not taking your work too seriously or you go crazy. So that's really it for this review. If you like what you see, I do cover a lot of more kids movies, mostly books, a lot of children's books, a sprinkling of secular, as you can, non-religious, homeschooling videos, some travel videos, some other educational resource stuff, as well as stuff like this, which is kind of fun. I covered a bunch of stuff in Halloween, a mixture of fun and educational. Same with here in November. This is coming out in November or summer. My schedule gets mixed up. Again, I'm covering a bunch of stuff in November, December, January. I have a whole bunch of other stuff planned. It's a mixture of education, and I will do some fun videos as well. So just to mix it up, and it's stuff that I enjoy. So I'm, in this case, sometimes I'm just sharing stuff that I enjoy that I would share with my kids. I probably wouldn't show this to my daughter till about middle school, though. But again, that's my opinion. So that is it. If you like what you see, like and subscribe. I have a lot more to come. Thank you.